Hello, welcome to Ratiocination for Audience and Purpose. First, let's begin by taking a look at what ratiocination entails. Ratiocination involves identifying issues within writing that need to be addressed. So, the way to identify those issues is by marking the text. Notice in the column labeled Code, we have a set of parentheses, which we could use to mark the text. We also have a box or a rectangle, which we could use to mark text. Other ways of marking text might be underlining, highlighting, and etc. Next, we want to consider the clue. The clue is the issue that we are focusing on. Next, we want to focus on the clue. The clue is what we focus on with students that tends to be problematic within their writing. So, for example, today we're focusing on audience and purpose. Many times, students write and they are unaware of their audience. That is to say, they write in unengaging ways that bore their audiences. What we want them to do is change the drab information into lively information. And then finally, when we're looking at the decoding column, we want to give students a strategy or a way to address their revision so that eventually they become independent. So decoding is a strategy that helps students to set goals for how they're going to revise independently in the future. Let's take a look at the specific examples here. Notice that our clue is parentheses to sentence beginnings because the students lack sentence variety. They may begin their sentences with the, instead of varying their sentence beginnings. If we want them to call attention to their sentence beginnings, we would use parentheses to offset the first few words of each sentence. In that way, we're not telling them that they're repeating too many times. They're able to see on their own that their repetition is purposeless and boring for their audience. Once they're able to do that, then we as teachers need to tell them how they can change the beginnings of their sentences. I would show students how I change my unvaried sentences to complex sentences with a variety of beginnings. I believe we're ready to work on audience and purpose ratiocination. Let's begin by reading my essay and noticing some of the major ideas that go to support my thesis statement that I could change to consider audience. So you always want to begin with students' actual papers. Each student should utilize his or her own paper for ratiocination, as revising is an individual activity. Muhammad Ali, the three-time heavyweight champion of the world, possesses an admirable trait: persistence. Raised in Kentucky, Ali seemed to be an average child until he was introduced to boxing at the age of 12. He put together an impressive string of amateur victories and eventually took the gold medal at the Olympics in 1960. Ali would have to encounter hardship to reach his ultimate goal, but he persevered, sticking to what he believed in. My thesis statement is the first sentence of the paragraph. Muhammad Ali, the three-time heavyweight champion of the world, possesses an admirable trait: persistence. If we can call attention to the second paragraph, you'll see that I've underlined a major supporting idea. Despite what his future seemed to hold, Ali fought for his right to continue his career. Again, we want to focus on what the student can do to engage his or her audience. Let's go back to our chart. For our decode, we have to decide what strategy we can use to help students to know how to revise to engage their audience. Additionally, we'll want to consider what goal we have for students when it's time to revise to address their audience. But first, as a teacher, I have to show them how using a mentor text. Let's look at the mentor text. From Turbulence, When It's Time to Change Your Seat by David Sedaris. On the flight to Raleigh, I sneezed, and the cough drop I'd been sucking on shot from my mouth, ricocheted off my folded tray table, and landed, as I remember it, in the lap of the woman beside me, who was asleep and had her arms folded across her chest. I'm surprised that the force didn't wake her. That's how hard it hit. But all she did was flutter her eyelids and let out a tiny sigh, the kind you hear from a baby. So if we're thinking about sensory imagery or the use of sensory language to create engagement for the audience, we have several examples. We know what it looks like when something is shot from something, like a bullet from a gun. So shot from my mouth creates quite the image. Ricocheted is also a word that creates an image in our head, as we are familiar with bullets ricocheting off objects, and we can picture that, and thus it engages us, the audience. The last thing that I'll highlight is another visual image with the flutter of her eyelids. If I wanted, I could also highlight tiny sigh, because it's not just visual imagery that engages an audience, it's what they can hear, especially when you make a comparison such as like that from a baby. So not only can we hear a tiny sigh, we can picture what type of tiny sigh, because we've all heard a baby sigh. Now, I'm going to attempt to change my identified piece of major evidence that supports my thesis to be more engaging, so it includes some type of imagery, some type of sound, some type of connection to something that we're all familiar with, like the sigh from a baby. I decided to utilize imagery to create a statement that would still support my thesis statement, but would engage my audience. So take a look at the comment that I inserted on the right. Ali changed his position like a dark and cloudless sky into a bright future filled with sunshine and boundless opportunities. Let's compare to the sentence that I had initially. Despite what his future seemed to hold, Ali fought for his right to continue his career. Clearly, an audience would more than likely connect to the revised sentence, which includes words that create a picture in the reader's head. I think we're ready to go back to our chart to identify what it is we can do to address engaging our audience. So what we have for decode is use engaging imagery / description to engage the audience. It's redundant, so I'm going to change it. And also, I'm going to give them a key number of revisions to make, and I want to make sure that I consider how much is too much, because if you overwhelm the students, chances are they will not meet your expectation. They'll just give up without even trying. Use imagery / description to engage the audience. Try changing 2 to 4 of the major ideas which support your thesis statement. Now we're ready to transition to our second focus, which is purpose. We want to teach students how to revive to better achieve their primary and/or their secondary purpose. So let's say that students are writing an expository piece. The primary purpose is to explain their idea, position, or train of thought. But always, our secondary purpose is to convince the reader to think how we think and believe what we believe. The code that we'll use this time is the bracket. So we will bracket ideas that we intend to use to help us to achieve our primary and/or secondary purpose. Let's take a look at my essay so that we can identify some of those ideas. Okay, let's review the thesis statement so that we can see how our bracketed support relates to purpose. The thesis statement again is highlighted. Muhammad Ali, the three-time heavyweight champion of the world, possesses an admirable trait, persistence. Now let's move down to the bracketed sentence. The bracketed sentence is supposed to explain how Muhammad Ali is persistent. He appealed the Supreme Court's decision and won. So he appealed is supposed to show his persistence. However, I'm not sure it's developed enough to explain in a way that would emphasize the purpose of the essay. So I need to revise that sentence to explain more aptly. Let's do that now. Let's take a look at a mentor text so we can find a way to revise so that we achieve our purpose more appropriately. I'm going to read the second paragraph. Under normal circumstances, I'd have three choices. The first being to do nothing. The woman would wake up in her own time and notice what looked like a shiny new button sewn to the crotch of her jeans. This was a small plane with 1 seat per row on aisle A and 2 seats per row on aisle B. We were on B, so should she go searching for answers, I would be the first person on her list. Is this yours? She'd ask, and I'd dumbly look into her lap. Notice this hypothetical situation adds humor, thus engagement, and it explains the main point of the situation. Let's put brackets around information that explains this author's controlling idea. The controlling idea, of course, is similar to our thesis statement for our expository essay. The controlling idea is that the man, David Sedaris, is in trouble and he needs to get out. Of course, the trouble being his cough drop is in a woman's lap. Which explanation do we want to bracket that helps Sedaris achieve his purpose of explaining his situation? The hypothetical explanation that Sedaris uses to explain his specific situation is: the woman would wake up in her own time and notice what looked like a shiny new button sewn to the crotch of her jeans. So again, you'll notice that the author utilizes imagery, but in addition, he utilizes a hypothetical situation, as I said would be our focus before. So not only do you explain what happened, you explain what might have happened should something not have occurred. It's a great way to explain. So I think I'm going to try to use a hypothetical situation to revise my essay to consider my purpose. Just as a reminder, using hypothetical situations to explain not only engages the audience, it also creates a deeper understanding of the consequences of situations. So, while the gifted boxer likely wanted to hide from the world, he fought against the Supreme Court and won. If he would have given up, America would never have known one of its greatest boxers. Now we're ready to move toward the decode in order to list a strategy that we can use and set goals for making revisions when we are dealing with purpose. So for our decode, we would want to use a hypothetical situation to explain with increasing depth. That means either changing 1 to 3 of the ideas like I did, and or including information that is toward your purpose or toward supporting your purpose, which is to explain and or influence your audience. Thank you for going on the Ratiocination roller coaster ride with me. I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Have a great night.